The unexpected invitation. Raven Novak stared at the holographic notification floating above her desk, its purple text casting an otherworldly glow across her dormitory room at the Intergalactic Academy of Sciences. The message was simple enough: annual interspecies pet exhibition day, mandatory participation required. Yet something about it made her stomach flip with both excitement and anxiety. "You've got to be kidding me," she muttered, running a hand through her silver-streaked dark hair. The soft chirping from the terrarium in the corner of her room seemed to answer in agreement. "What do you think about this, Perseus?" The creature inside the terrarium unfurled itself, revealing iridescent scales that shifted colors like oil on water. The 6-foot-long Komodo dragon lifted its head, tongue flicking out to taste the air. Perseus had been her companion since she'd rescued him from an illegal exotic pet trading ring back on Earth, and now he was her only reminder of home here at the Academy. A gentle chime indicated an incoming call. The holographic display shifted to show the concerned face of Professor Xylix, her xenobiology instructor. The Arcturian's crystalline features sparkled as they spoke, their voice resonating like wind chimes. "Student Novak, I trust you've received the exhibition notice. I wanted to discuss your particular situation." Raven crossed her arms. "You mean because I'm the only human student, or because my pet isn't exactly a fluffy bunny?" "Both, actually." Xylix's facets shifted in what Raven had learned was their species' equivalent of a nervous smile. "The committee is concerned about maintaining a calming atmosphere. Many of our students bring companions that are, shall we say, less intimidating than Earth fauna." "Perseus is perfectly well behaved," Raven protested. "He's probably safer than half the bioengineered pets the other students have. Remember when Tlaxon brought that self-replicating amoeba that nearly consumed the entire biochemistry lab?" The professor's crystalline structure vibrated with discomfort at the memory. "That was an unfortunate incident. But you must understand, most species here have evolved in much more controlled environments than Earth. The mere sight of a predator can cause severe distress." Raven glanced at Perseus, who had moved closer to the terrarium wall, watching the conversation with intelligent eyes. "So what are you saying? That I should skip the exhibition?" "The notice said it was mandatory." "Not at all," Xylix replied quickly. "In fact, the headmaster believes this could be an excellent opportunity for cultural exchange. We just want to ensure proper safety protocols are in place. Perhaps if you could demonstrate Perseus's training?" A slow smile spread across Raven's face. "Actually, Professor, I think I have a better idea. What if we turn this into an educational opportunity? I could prepare a presentation about Earth's relationship with its wildlife. Show everyone that not everything from a death world is out to eat them." The professor's crystalline structure brightened with interest. "That could actually work. Though I should warn you, the last time we had a human give a presentation about Earth wildlife, 3 Methusian students had to be treated for anxiety-induced molting." "Trust me," Raven said, her confidence growing. "By the end of the exhibition, everyone's going to see Perseus differently. And maybe they'll start seeing humans differently too." As the call ended, Raven turned to Perseus, who had pressed his snout against the terrarium wall. "Well, buddy, looks like we've got some preparing to do. Time to show this galaxy that Earth's creatures aren't just monsters from their nightmares." She began pulling up holographic data on Komodo dragons, their conservation status, and their role in Earth's ecosystem. As she worked, her mind raced with possibilities. The other students had never seen anything like Perseus before: his intelligence, his strength, and most importantly, his gentle nature despite his fearsome appearance. The exhibition was in 3 days. 3 days to prepare a presentation that would challenge everything these alien species thought they knew about Earth and its inhabitants. 3 days to prove that sometimes the scariest-looking creatures could turn out to be the most misunderstood. Perseus let out a low hiss, his scales shifting to match the purple glow of the holograms. Raven smiled. "Yeah, I know. It's going to be interesting. But maybe that's exactly what this place needs, a little bit of Earth-style chaos to shake things up. She pulled up another hologram, this one showing the Academy's exhibition hall. It was time to start planning how to introduce a Komodo dragon to a room full of aliens who thought Earth was nothing but a planet of nightmares. Somehow, she had a feeling this was going to be one exhibition day no one would ever forget. Chaos unleashed. The morning of the exhibition arrived with the artificial dawn of the space station's environmental systems. Raven stood outside the exhibition hall's massive doors, her hand resting on Perseus's specially designed hover transport. The Komodo dragon lay calm inside, his scales shifting between shades of deep green and bronze. "Remember the plan," she whispered, more to herself than to Perseus. Inside the hall, she could hear the excited chatter of hundreds of alien students and their various companions. Through the transparent sections of the door, she caught glimpses of floating light orbs, crystalline constructs, and what appeared to be a semi-sentient cloud of bioluminescent spores. "Student Novak." Professor Xylix's chiming voice approached from behind. "I see you've, oh my." The crystalline being's facets dulled slightly at the sight of Perseus. "He's larger than I remembered." "Don't worry, Professor. We've practiced everything." Raven activated her presentation tablet, bringing up the holographic displays she'd prepared. "Perseus knows exactly what to do." The doors slid open with a soft hiss, and instantly, the cacophony of alien voices died down. Every eye, sensory stalk, and photoreceptive organ turned toward the entrance. Raven took a deep breath and stepped forward, guiding Perseus's transport into the hall. The reaction was immediate and intense. A group of Methusian students nearest the door began shedding their outer layers in panic. Several floating orb pets zipped upward, colliding with the ceiling in their haste to escape. Someone screamed in a frequency that made Raven's teeth vibrate. "Everyone, please remain calm." Professor Xylix's voice rang out, though their own crystalline structure was vibrating with nervous energy. "This is exactly the kind of reaction we're here to address. Student Novak, perhaps you should begin your presentation." Raven nodded, trying to ignore the way the crowd had backed away, forming a perfect circle of empty space around her and Perseus. She activated the first hologram, which showed Earth's diverse ecosystem. "Before you panic," she began, her voice steadied despite her racing heart, "I want you to look at something. This is Earth, my home. Yes, it's classified as a death world, but it's also one of the most biodiverse planets in the known galaxy." A Voltaian student near the front, their electrical field crackling with anxiety, raised an appendage. "But why would you choose to bring a predator? Surely you have less dangerous creatures on your world." Raven smiled, pressing a button on the transport's control panel. The containment field dissolved, and Perseus calmly stepped out onto the exhibition floor. The crowd collectively gasped and retreated another few steps. "Perseus isn't just a predator," Raven explained, as the Komodo dragon settled into a relaxed pose beside her. "He's a perfect example of how Earth species adapt and form relationships with humans. Watch this." She pulled a training target from her bag, holding it up. Perseus's head tracked the movement, but he remained perfectly still. "Perseus, mark," she commanded. The Komodo dragon's tongue flicked out, tasting the air, but he didn't move. "Release," she said, and only then did he smoothly rise and walk toward the target, taking it gently from her hand. "Impossible," muttered a faculty member, their tentacles writhing in disbelief. "These creatures are apex predators. The database says they can detect blood from kilometers away." "That's correct," Raven acknowledged, as Perseus returned to his spot, still holding the target. "But intelligence isn't limited to prey species. Perseus understands over 50 commands, can recognize different individuals, and has never shown aggression toward anyone at the sanctuary where I worked." She was about to continue when a small, gelatinous pet blob escaped its owner's grip and rolled directly toward Perseus. The crowd tensed, several students reaching for emergency teleporters. But Perseus simply watched the blob with mild interest, his scales shifting to match its iridescent surface. The blob's owner, a nervous-looking quantum collective student, inched forward. He's not going to eat squish. Of course not, Raven said softly. Perseus, gentle. The Komodo dragon lowered his head, tongue flicking out to investigate the blob, which had started to emit curious chirping sounds. He knows the difference between prey and friends. Slowly, cautiously, a few students began to edge closer. Perseus remained perfectly still, allowing them to observe him. His scales continued to shift colors, creating mesmerizing patterns that seemed to entrance some of the more visually oriented species. Fascinating, Professor Xylix chimed, their crystalline structure now glowing with scientific interest. The level of control and intelligence displayed is remarkable. But surely this isn't typical of Earth creatures. Raven's grin widened. Actually, Professor, Perseus is just one example. Humans have formed similar bonds with everything from wolves to elephants, birds of prey to dolphins. We've learned to understand and work with the predators of our world, not just fear them. She brought up another hologram, this one showing various Earth animals working alongside humans. Our relationship with Earth's wildlife isn't about dominance, it's about mutual respect and understanding. Perseus isn't just my pet, he's my partner in helping others understand that sometimes the scariest-looking creatures can be the gentlest souls. As if to prove her point, Perseus had allowed Squish the blob to nestle against his side, the two creatures seemingly fascinated by each other. More students were approaching now, their initial fear giving way to curious interest. The exhibition hall, which had started in chaos, was transforming into something entirely different. Raven watched as barriers of fear and prejudice began to crumble, replaced by the universal language of scientific curiosity. Maybe, just maybe, this was the first step toward helping the galaxy understand that Earth and its inhabitants, both human and animal, were more than just the monsters of their nightmares. Understanding through fear. As the exhibition continued, something unexpected began to happen. The very fear that had initially gripped the alien students was transforming into a catalyst for understanding. Raven found herself surrounded by a growing crowd of curious observers, each with questions that revealed as much about their own species as they did about their perceptions of Earth. But how do you prevent him, from following natural hunting instincts? Asked a Nexilian student, their crystalline exoskeleton refracting light in patterns that suggested deep thought. Our species spent millennia engineering the predatory instincts out of our companion creatures. Raven watched as Perseus demonstrated perfect impulse control, ignoring a training lure she'd brought specifically for this purpose. We don't prevent it, exactly. We work with those instincts, channel them. Perseus still hunts, in controlled situations. The key is helping him understand when it's appropriate. Professor Xylix, who had been taking extensive notes, chimed in. Remarkable. Instead of suppressing natural behaviors, you've created a framework for them. Most fascinating. A small commotion near the exhibition hall's entrance drew everyone's attention. A new group of students had arrived with their pets, including a voidborn named Trix, whose companion was a swirling mass of dark energy that seemed to consume light itself. Speaking of natural behaviors, Raven pointed out, isn't that technically more dangerous than Perseus? I mean, at worst, he could bite someone. That thing could create a localized singularity. The voidborn student drifted closer, their ethereal form rippling with what might have been embarrassment. She has a point. Last week, Umbra here accidentally created a temporary time dilation field in the cafeteria. Tuesday's lunch ended up being served last Thursday. This admission seemed to break some invisible barrier. Soon, other students began sharing stories about their own pets' potentially dangerous abilities. A quantum collective student's companion could phase through solid matter, occasionally taking parts of walls with it. A luminarian's pet produced light so intense it had once temporarily blinded half the biology class. Perhaps, Professor Xylix observed, their crystalline form vibrating with excitement, we have been somewhat hypocritical in our assessment of Earth fauna. Each species here has evolved alongside creatures that others might consider dangerous. Raven nodded, scratching Perseus under his chin as his scales shifted to match the iridescent patterns of a nearby student's floating orb pet. That's exactly it. Earth isn't unique because it has dangerous creatures. It's unique because we learn to understand them instead of trying to change them completely. A holographic display activated in the center of the hall, showing statistical data about various pets present at the exhibition. Raven recognized it as part of the Academy's automatic safety monitoring system. To everyone's surprise, Perseus's threat assessment rating was lower than several of the engineered companion creatures. But Earth is still classified as a death world, protested a faculty member, their tentacles waving in agitation. The database clearly states. The database, Raven interrupted gently, was written by species that evolved in much more forgiving environments. To you, Earth seems impossibly hostile. But to us, it's home. We survived and thrived not by conquering our world's dangerous creatures, but by learning to coexist with them. As if to demonstrate this point, Perseus had attracted quite a collection of curious pets. The Quantum Collective's phase-shifting companion was attempting to mimic his color-changing scales, while Trix's dark energy pet Umbra had created a small gravity well that Perseus was playfully rolling his training ball into. Look at that, Raven continued, gesturing to the unlikely group. Different species, different abilities, different levels of potential danger, all getting along because they're given the chance to understand each other. Isn't that what this academy is supposed to be about? The exhibition hall had transformed from a place of fear into something resembling a living laboratory of interspecies interaction. Students who had initially backed away in terror were now crowding around, taking readings with their devices, making observations, and most importantly, beginning to see Perseus, and by extension, Earth itself, in a new light. One particularly bold Malthusian student had even stopped molting long enough to ask if they could feed Perseus his lunch. Under Raven's careful supervision, the student presented the Komodo dragon with his specially prepared meal, watching in fascination as Perseus demonstrated the table manners that would put many sentient beings to shame. You know, Professor Xylix chimed thoughtfully, this entire situation rather perfectly encapsulates humanity's unique approach to the galaxy. Where others see insurmountable danger, you see potential for connection. Raven smiled, watching as Perseus gently accepted another treat from a student who, just hours ago, had been convinced he would devour their entire class. Maybe that's our real contribution to the galactic community. Not our technology or our survival skills, but our ability to look at something frightening and see the possibility of friendship. The afternoon continued, and with each passing moment, the barrier between Earth's dangerous wildlife and the galaxy's safe companions seemed to blur a little more. In the end, perhaps the most dangerous assumption had been thinking that any species could be simply classified as safe or dangerous without considering the complex relationships that defined their existence. Breaking barriers. News travels fast in an interstellar academy, but it travels even faster when that news involves a Komodo dragon playing fetch with a sentient dark matter entity. By the time evening approached, the exhibition hall had become standing room only, with students and faculty from every department crowding in to witness the unprecedented scene. Explain again how he processes visual information, demanded Dr. Nexus, the head of xenobiology. The usually stoic quantum matrix being was literally vibrating with excitement, their grid-like structure glowing with intense curiosity. Our scans suggest his eyes are processing light in ways we didn't think possible for Earth reptiles. Raven, who had been fielding questions for hours, smiled patiently. That's because Perseus has adapted to living among different species. He's learned to track movement patterns that aren't natural to Earth creatures. Watch this. She nodded to Trix, who commanded their dark energy pet Umbra to create a small gravitational eddy. Perseus's eyes tracked the distortion in space-time perfectly, his scales shifting to match the void-like appearance of Umbra. The crowd of observers erupted in excited murmurs and electromagnetic pulses of appreciation. Remarkable adaptation. Professor Xylix chimed in, their crystalline form practically singing with scientific enthusiasm. It seems Earth creatures are far more capable of change than our databases suggested. Student Novak, would you be willing to participate in a long-term study of interspecies adaptation? Before Raven could respond, an alarm blared through the exhibition hall. Red warning lights began flashing, and a computerized voice announced, "Warning. Environmental system malfunction detected. Gravity fluctuations imminent." The reaction was immediate. Pets of all species began showing signs of distress. Floating orbs sparked erratically, phase-shifting creatures started blinking in and out of existence, and several of the more sensitive species retreated into protective shells or force fields. Everyone remained calm. Professor Xylix called out, but their own crystalline structure was vibrating with anxiety. "Please secure your companions and proceed to the designated safety areas." But amidst the growing chaos, something unexpected happened. Perseus, rather than showing any signs of stress, remained perfectly calm. His presence seemed to have a ripple effect on the other creatures nearby. The pets that had been playing with him earlier began to settle, mimicking his composed demeanor. "Look," shouted a student, pointing at the unusual scene. Perseus had positioned himself in a stable stance, and remarkably, other creatures were gathering around him. Umbra, the dark energy pet, had created a small field of stable gravity around the group. Raven quickly recognized what was happening. They're adapting to each other's strengths. Perseus is providing a visual anchor of stability, while Umbra's counteracting the gravity fluctuations. The other pets are falling into a natural support pattern. Dr. Nexus's matrix pulsed with revelation. Of course. Earth creatures evolved in an environment of constant change. They don't just survive chaos, they thrive in it. They're showing our engineered companions how to adapt naturally. The exhibition had transformed into an impromptu masterclass in crisis management. Students watched in amazement as their pets, following Perseus's example, began working together to create a pocket of stability in the chaos. The phase-shifting pets created a boundary zone, while floating orbs adjusted their electromagnetic fields to help maintain balance. "This is precisely why we need more Death World perspectives in our curriculum," Professor Xylix declared, their voice carrying over the diminishing alarm signals. "Look at how these creatures are cooperating. No genetic engineering, no artificial behavioral modifications, just pure, natural adaptation." As the environmental systems slowly stabilized, Raven found herself surrounded by faculty members all talking at once. The head of the Advanced Evolution Studies Department wanted to start a new research program. The Cultural Exchange Coordinator was already planning a series of lectures on Earth wildlife. Even the normally reclusive Void Studies professor had emerged to observe. "I don't understand," a young Methusian student said, their outer layers finally settling after the crisis. "Why aren't you scared? Everything was going wrong, but you and Perseus stayed so calm." Raven knelt down to the student's level, while Perseus maintained his position as the calm center of the pet gathering. "On Earth, we learned a long time ago that fear doesn't help in a crisis. What helps is staying calm, adapting to the situation, and working together. That's how we survived on our death world, not by running from danger, but by learning from it." The student's eye stalks swiveled thoughtfully. "Is that why you brought Perseus to the academy? To teach us?" Actually, Raven laughed, reaching out to scratch Perseus's scales as he finally relaxed his vigilant pose. "I brought him because he's my friend. Teaching wasn't the plan, it just happened naturally. Kind of like everything else today." As the excitement settled, Professor Xylix approached with an official-looking holographic document. "Student Novak, in light of today's events, the Academy Board has made a rather unprecedented decision. We would like to establish a permanent Earth wildlife studies program, with you and Perseus as our primary instructors." The professor's crystalline structure sparkled with amusement at Raven's shocked expression. After all, who better to teach about Earth's creatures than someone who truly understands them? And after today's demonstration, I believe many of our students could benefit from learning the Earth way of handling chaos. Raven looked around the exhibition hall, now transformed into something entirely different from what it had been that morning. Where there had been fear, there was now curiosity. Where there had been division, there was now cooperation. And most importantly, where there had been misunderstanding, there was now a bridge between worlds. A new perspective. 1 month after the memorable pet exhibition, the Intergalactic Academy of Sciences had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The once sterile corridors now featured holoprojections of Earth's diverse ecosystems, and the newly established Earth Wildlife Studies Department had become one of the most popular programs on campus. Raven stood at the front of her classroom, Perseus lounging comfortably on his specially designed platform beside her. The seats were filled with students from across the galaxy, their various appendages raised in eager questions as she concluded her lecture on adaptation strategies. But Professor Novak, a Luminarian student, glowed brightly with excitement. "You're saying Earth creatures adapted naturally to all these environmental changes? Without any genetic engineering?" "That's right," Raven confirmed, pulling up a holographic display of Earth's evolutionary timeline. "Natural selection drove innovation in ways artificial modification never could. Perseus here can regulate his body temperature, track multiple types of prey, and even adapt his hunting strategies based on the situation." The door slid open, admitting Professor Xylix and a group of distinguished-looking beings, representatives from other academic institutions across the galaxy. The crystalline professor's facets gleamed with pride as they observed the class. "As you can see," Xylix chimed to the visitors, "the Earth Wildlife Studies program has revolutionized our understanding of adaptation and survival." "Student, excuse me, Professor Novak's methods have shown remarkable results." Indeed, the evidence was all around them. In one corner of the classroom, a student's phase-shifting pet was practicing controlled movements under Perseus's watchful eye. Near the windows, Trix's dark matter companion Umbra was demonstrating cooperative hunting techniques with several other species' pets. "The most fascinating development," Dr. Nexus added, their matrix pulsing with academic excitement, "has been the effect on our engineered companion species. They're showing signs of natural adaptation we thought impossible. It seems exposure to Earth creatures has awakened dormant evolutionary capabilities." Raven smiled, watching as Perseus demonstrated a complex problem-solving exercise for the class. The Komodo dragon methodically worked through the puzzle box she designed, showing the gathered aliens that Earth predators were far more than just instinct-driven hunters. "The truth is," she addressed the visiting delegates, "we've all been looking at this wrong. Earth isn't just a death world that produced dangerous creatures. It's a planet that taught its inhabitants the most important lesson in the galaxy: how to adapt, survive, and thrive through cooperation rather than isolation." A small commotion at the back of the classroom drew everyone's attention. A new student had arrived, the first swarm collective ever to enroll in the academy. The being, composed of thousands of tiny floating particles, approached cautiously. "Is it true," the collective buzzed, "its particles forming words in the air, that Earth creatures can teach us about unified consciousness? We heard your Komodo dragon helped the pets form a cooperative during the gravity crisis. Why don't you see for yourself?" Raven gestured to Perseus, who had already adjusted his scales to mirror the collective's shifting patterns. "Perseus, welcome our new friend." The Komodo dragon smoothly rose and approached the swarm collective, his movements careful and deliberate. The collective's particles swirled with curiosity, some breaking formation to orbit Perseus like tiny satellites. To everyone's amazement, Perseus began moving in perfect synchronization with the swarm's patterns. "Extraordinary," one of the visiting delegates exclaimed. "It's displaying advanced social intelligence far beyond what our databases suggested possible for Earth reptiles." "That's because your databases were written from a perspective of fear," Raven explained, watching the beautiful interaction between her Earth companion and the alien collective. "When you approach different species with curiosity instead of fear, you discover capabilities you never imagined possible." As the class concluded, students lingered to watch Perseus and the Swarm Collective continue their improvised dance of interaction. Professor Xylix approached Raven, their crystalline form radiating satisfaction. "You know," they chimed softly, "when you first arrived with Perseus, I thought we were making a terrible mistake. Now I realize we were making history instead." Raven watched as a group of students gathered around Perseus, their various pets joining in what had become a daily ritual of cross-species socialization. The fear that had once permeated the academy had been replaced by something far more valuable: understanding. "The galaxy's a big place," she replied, "full of creatures and beings we might find scary at first glance. But maybe that's the point. Maybe we're supposed to be a little scared, a little uncertain. It pushes us to learn, to adapt, to understand." The Swarm Collective, now fully integrated into the group, formed words in the air: "On behalf of all species once considered too dangerous for integration, we thank Earth for showing us another way." As the sun began to set outside the Academy's massive windows, casting the classroom in the mixed light of 3 different stars, Raven reflected on how far they'd come. One pet exhibition had sparked a change that was spreading across the galaxy, challenging preconceptions and breaking down barriers between species. Perseus, sensing her contemplative mood, returned to her side, his scales now a calm mixture of sunset colors. Together, they had shown the galaxy that Earth's greatest contribution wasn't its technology or its survival skills, but its fundamental lesson: that in a universe full of differences, understanding and adaptation were the keys to not just survival, but true connection. The age-old fear of the death world and its inhabitants was finally giving way to something new: respect, curiosity, and the recognition that sometimes the most dangerous-looking worlds had the most to teach about living in harmony with the chaos of the cosmos.